Hey, what is up YouTube? Cheating Lefty here for yet another Building the Bag video. This time we're taking a look at the mid-ranges. Now, in general, mid-ranges is the weakest part of my bag just because I don't really use them very much. I want to change that in 2023, so let's go ahead and take a look at what mid-ranges I'll be considering to throw this next season. Now, if you want to try some of the discs you're going to see here today, be sure to go visit Great Lakes Disc. They have amazing selection, great customer service, and extremely fast shipping. You won't be disappointed. Also, use promo code LEFTY to get 10% off your order. Let's go ahead and begin by taking a look at the understable mid-ranges. And when I mean understable, I mean the ridiculous will never come back understable mid-ranges, which are primarily in the bag for those niche style shots like say patent pending, just restricted, or standstill throws. To kick it off, we're going to be taking a look at the Paradox from Axiom discs. Now, the first thing that jumps out at me with the Paradox is that, at least for backhand, it feels extremely comfortable. I love how this disc just kind of molds to my hand when it comes for backhand throws, and it matches exactly the kind of shot shape that I'm looking for. It kind of starts out straight, and then as soon as it turns, it just will never come back. And then on those restricted like standstill or patent pending shots, again, it's going to ride out fairly straight, maybe depending on the angle I give it, it's going to have a little bit of turn, but I'm looking for something that I'm not going to be sacrificing a ton of distance with when I need to throw a restricted shot. Just let that glide take over, just let it flip up to flat, maybe get some turn, and just being able to kind of weave between trees in the woods, because that's where you're going to be using a lot of those kind of patent pending shots. Definitely a great woods disc. Now we're going to take a look at the Westside discs Tursas, which this is actually what I was using for this style of shot before I went over to Discraft, and I do like the feel, like the Paradox. It has a nice gradual dome to it. So like the Paradox, it feels very good in the hand. The major difference when it came to the flight is that it just wasn't holding, I guess, straight as long as the Paradox. As soon as it flipped up to flat, it was already starting to turn. Even as you can see here with the patent pending standstill, it gets a lot more gradual turn in that mid-flight than, say, the Paradox did. But unlike the Paradox, it has a little bit more fight at the end, so it's going to stable out a little bit more. It's going to hold the line a little bit better. But that also worries me that at the end of the flight, it's not quite going to do what I want. Now moving over to the last, that is the one I've actually been using for about the last 3 years, and that is the Stratus. Now I've been primarily using the ESP run from Ledgestone, which are kind of more easy to find because those are semi-recent. However, those are becoming harder and harder to find. So just for that reason alone, the Paradox and the Tursas are a little bit more appealing. Now with the Stratus, my biggest complaint is the feel. This is such a shallow mid-range, which normally I like shallow discs, but those are more for forehand, not backhand. And with this being so shallow, it feels like I'm trying to backhand a plate. Now the flight is spot on. The flight is exactly what I want. It flies out very straight for about almost 2/3 of the flight, has a nice little bit of turn towards the very end and kind of holds it when it comes to the patent pending, and when thrown flat, it just holds that turn the entire way. It's so workable, perfect for wood style disc golf. So if you play a lot in the woods like we do here in Minnesota, you really need a disc in the bag that can hit lines like these. Now let's go ahead and talk about the more traditional semi-understable mid-ranges. These are ones that I'm looking for to be perfect hyzer flips, to ride very straight or throw flat and get a very effortless kind of flex S-curve style shot. The first one looking at is the Meteor. I do have a lot of experience with the Meteor, probably the most in this grouping because I've had it in and out of the bag for several years. And the reason it's kind of in and out of the bag is because my major gripe with the Meteor is that the feel. It just, the way the bottom of the rim is shaped or whatnot, it just doesn't feel quite right on certain days. Now some days it feels extremely comfortable and it just feels like it fits my hand really well. Then other days when I hold it, I just can't get it to feel right. But I really do like the flight because I can hit a lot of different lines. Keep it on a steeper hyzer, and it'll hold the hyzer line the entire way, kind of a nice forward penetrating hyzer. A little bit of hyzer, it'll flip up to flat, hold really nice straight laser beam lines with minimal fade, and then just throw it flat, and it's going to have a really nice effortless S-curve. Now, the next up is the MD1 or Mindbender in that Metal Flake C line from Discmania. This is a newer one that I've just started trying out, and I have to say, this is a disc I would love for a one disc round. You can hit any line with it. It's just extremely straight. I don't want to say that it gets turn. Unlike the Meteor, which will get some turn in the mid-flight and then will hyzer back, the Mindbender is more just, it just holds the line you put it on. Put it on a hyzer, it's going to hold a forward penetrating arcing hyzer. Throw it flat, it's going to hold just a really nice straight line, get a little bit of fade at the very end depending how much height you give it, and then when thrown on an anhyzer, it's going to hold that anhyzer line. So again, it's workable on so many different lines, and it can hold up to the wind better than I was expecting it to. However, again, it doesn't get that S-curve. That's the thing I couldn't get it to do, is S-curve shots. It holds really well at all these other lines, but I wasn't able to get it to S-curve. So maybe it's something where it's kind of more slotted in that very straight mid-range category, but at that point it just doesn't have quite the overstability I'm looking for at the very end of the flight. So it's just a very unique disc that I'm going to really need to try out more. Now, also from Discmania, we're taking a look at the Origin, primarily the Midnight Prowl in that meta plastic, mainly because I like how it has just a little bit more stability to it in the later parts of the flight than, say, either the Neo or the soft Exo plastic. This one is just kind of that really nice throw it flat. It's going to have a big, nice amount of turn, as you can see here, in that mid-flight, before at the very end it checks up and has a little bit of a hyzer back, depending how much height you give it. But also, because it has that understability in the early part of the flight, unlike the Mindbender, it is great for hyzer flips. I can throw this thing on a little bit of hyzer, it'll flip up to flat, hold an incredibly straight, just laser beam straight flight, and then have very minimal, if any, fade at the very end. And if I do manipulate the angle of the release to, say, slight anhyzer, it's going to hold that turn all the way to the ground. Like the Mindbender, this is great for those one disc rounds, but it has more effortless S-curve potential versus the, again, Mindbender was just dead straight. Next up, we do have the Infinite Discs Anubis. This is one I hadn't even heard of and just kind of picked it up just to kind of see what it would do. The feel is semi-similar to, say, the Meteor, at least the way the bottom part of the rim is, but I do like it has a little bit more dome to it, so it feels a little bit more comfortable. But the flight is kind of an enigma for me. When I was thinking it was going to be understable, it flew with a little bit more stability in it, and then when I thought, okay, well, it's a little bit more stable, it then would flip on me a little bit. It holds torque a little bit better than, say, the Origin or the Meteor, and it has a nice, probably the strongest late finish. But this is one of those discs where I just haven't quite been able to figure out yet, so I'm gonna have to give this one a little bit more time, a little bit more practice. But when I do start to unlock this disc's potential, I'll be sure to let you know. Now, next up is one of my personal old favorites, and that is the First Run Frost Claymore. This is a very fun disc. I love how flexible it is. It feels amazing in the hand and in that frost plastic. Oh boy, the grip is fantastic. Also the durability, it will really hold up a lot because it's not going to take a lot of chunks out of it if you slam into trees, which I've been known to hit a couple here and there. So with the flight, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Mindbender, to be honest, but more of a seasoned Mindbender. It has a little bit less resistance to torque in the early part of the flight, so it's easier to hyzer flip. You can actually get it to hyzer flip, and it gets a little bit more turn in the mid-flight than the Mindbender, but it's a very straight disc, very point-and-shoot style mid-range. But it does have just a little bit more late flight stability than, say, the Mindbender, so kind of in that realm where it's not really the most understable of mid-range. Maybe this kind of fills that gap between, say, the Midnight Prowl and what you're going to see here in these kind of more semi-overstable mid-ranges. So kicking us off, we have the Emac Truth in the regular Lucid plastic. This is one of the fastest mid-ranges I have ever thrown. I threw this quite a bit. It was actually probably in the bag for the first 3 years that I was playing disc golf. It was basically like throwing a fairway driver that had the control of a mid-range. As long as I didn't have a low ceiling, I was pulling out this Lucid Emac Truth. It was my go-to for sure. For the flight, it rides extremely straight. Unless I really rip into it, I can get it just ever so slight little bit of turn, but it always had that finish. Now, yes, in the wind, it did tend to turn over, but on calm, mild windy days, this is an extreme workhorse of a disc, and it's one of those that, you know what, because of that history, it definitely has to be the front runner for making the bag for the 2023 season, but we'll have to see. Next is the Rock 3 from Innova Discs in Champion Plastic. This thing has a little bit more torque resistance and just a little bit more late stability than that Lucid Emac Truth, but again, that's been in the bag for a while, versus this was fairly fresh and still is, as I really haven't thrown it a whole lot, maybe a few rounds here or there in the past, but this definitely is kind of that step up. It holds better in the wind, and with its extra torque resistance, I can really rip into the Rock 3 with nearly full power, and it's going to ride incredibly straight, and then about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the flight, that's when it's going to have a nice predictable finish. Again, step up when it comes to wind fighting, holds torque a little bit better, doesn't go nearly as far, doesn't have nearly as much glide as the Emac Truth, but still, overall, this is just a good, very straight, with just a nice predictable finish at the end. I can see why people love the Rock 3. Now we're getting into the Rift. This is what I was using last year. This actually kicked the buzz out of my bag last year, because its flight was more what I was looking for in this slot. Now for feel, it feels great. It has a nice semi-dome to it. Again, primarily backhand, not for forehand, but it just kind of sculpts to the hand really well, fits nice and comfortably, and then the flight really resembles that Lucid Emac Truth. It's workable in the mid-flight a little bit more than the Rock 3, more than just a standard buzz. It's something that if I really rip into, it's going to hold very, very straight with very minimal fade, but it's also a disc that, you know what, it can get a little bit of turn. I don't have to put 100% effort into it to get it to ride absolutely straight with just a little bit of fade. It was just a disc, you know, I don't want to say slack off, but it was just a nice feeling that I didn't have to give it 100% in order to get the desired shot. Now, when it comes to the wind fighting overstable mid-ranges, to be honest, the first two are primarily just for backhand, and that is the Emac Truth in the Lucid X plastic. This is just kind of the big brother to the earlier Emac Truth. It's very flat versus the other one just had a little bit of dome to it. Makes it feel very comfortable for forehand, but as you're going to see, it's not really a mid-range that I would trust into any kind of wind on a forehand shot. So again, this is primarily just for backhand. I can throw it very hard, flat to slight anhyzer, and it's going to hold a nice straight line, nice predictable finish at the very end. But again, as you can see for forehand, I mean, I'm going to have to put it on a lot of hyzer and really slow down my arm speed. So it's not really a mid-range I can trust in the wind when it comes to forehand. So as my collection grows when it comes to the overstable mid-ranges, this is definitely an area I'm going to have to revisit a little bit more, and I'll probably do an update video in the future. So if you have any suggestions, please be sure to comment down below. Now, the next up, we have the Rock 3 in the Tour Series Halo Plastic, the Jennifer Allen Tour Series, and I really do like this Rock 3 when it comes to backhand. It feels pretty comfortable in the hand, it has a decently high shoulder, then pretty flat flight plate, so it's comfortable if I want to use it on forehand, but as we'll kind of see, just like the Lucid X Emac Truth, it just quite isn't the best there for my style of throw. But for backhand, this is exactly what I'm looking for. It's very overstable, huge wind fighter, and it's something that even in the wind, it's going to have a nice predictable finish. It'll straighten out a little bit, but it's going to hold really well even into strong headwinds. It almost out of the hand, it wants to start hyzering almost no matter what line I put it on. So backhand, this is what I'm looking for. Forehand, it's workable, but in a strong headwind, it's not necessarily something I'd be able to trust. Now we have the Quake, which is probably the most overstable of all the discs that I'm shown here, and it's safe to say it is the one true overstable mid-range that I have in this bunch. Now, it is extremely board flat, practically puddle topped, which makes it so comfortable when it comes to forehand. In fact, for the last couple years, that is what I used this for, is primarily for those forehand approaches, just because on backhand, it does nothing but hyzer. As soon as it gets out of my hand, it's basically like a zone. It's just going to dump, it's just going to crash, and then forehand is just going to ride out very straight, then have a hyzer at the very end, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. So you may say, why not just throw the Quake? Well, reason being, the first run Quake that I have, it's very difficult to find, and I don't have any backups, so if I were to lose this, I'd be pretty SOL, so I have to find a mid-range that is easily replaceable. Alright, let's go ahead and wrap things up. For all of you still watching, thank you all very, very much. I hope by now all of you are subscribers, and if you aren't, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like button as well. It really helps out the channel. Also, once we get to 7,500 subscribers, I will be doing a giveaway, probably 3 different starter sets, so be on the lookout for more information there. And coming up next, we do have the fairway drivers that I'll be testing out for 2023. You're not going to want to miss it. I should have it out shortly after the release of this video. Thank you again, everyone. Until next time, keep banging them chains.